Hello, my name is Stephen Coles, and I've worked for the last 25 years as a scenic designer and computer artist in theater, film, and TV. I thought it might be helpful to produce a series of video tutorials to show how I do my work in 3D modeling and drafting. In years past, we made scenic models out of mat board, glue, and lots of X-Acto blades. I always loved model building because it was so much like building actual scenery, yet you didn't have to get covered with sawdust. But building an entire set in half-inch scale out of mat board was very time-consuming, and it was next to impossible to get a lot of detail into the model. Now with 3D modeling in the computer, we get a lot more detail, color, and texture, as well as really terrific lighting possibilities. And the model will never warp in humidity or collect dust on a shelf like the old handmade models. Computer software isn't cheap, and it's still time-consuming when you are first starting to learn the programs. So that is why we are here today, to see how we can produce scenic models quickly and efficiently. The first thing that I would like to make clear is that there are 1,000 ways to do any one process on the computer. As we go along, I will show you a few different ways to do things and point out the ways that work best for me. You may find other ways that work best for you, and that's fine. The three main software programs that I use are Vectorworks, Cinema 4D, and Photoshop. I'm going to go through some of the ways that I customized each program to work best for me, as well as some of the basic processes of creation in each program. But I will try not to dwell on the boring stuff for too long so that we can get to the really fun stuff. So let's start with Vectorworks. When you first open the program and create a new document, there are a lot of different settings that I like to adjust, and I want to show you some of those settings that might make my Vectorworks look different from your Vectorworks. So we'll go up to File, New, and you can see over here that we have a keyboard shortcut, Command N. I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts a lot, so it's a good idea to try to learn those. So we have a new document, and by default it's in Portrait, and I tend to like to have my drawings in landscape whenever possible, because that's the way the screen is laid out, is in landscape, so I like the document to fit the screen. So I'm going to go to File, Page Setup, Printer Setup. I'm going to leave it at US letter, and I'm going to put it on landscape. Then I'm going to fit the document to the screen. View, Zoom, and Fit to Page, which is Command 0. I'm going to be using that one a lot. And that fits it to the screen. Currently our scale, if you look up here, is 1:1. It's full scale. So I'm going to change that. Across the top of the document there's several menu headings. If yours doesn't look exactly like mine, you don't need to worry about it. These menu headings here. If you want to hide or show any of those, there's this little triangle button over here in the upper right hand corner. If you just click on that triangle, you can see which ones I have selected and which ones I have deselected. It's the same is true for these little buttons here. If you twirl down this triangle, you can hide or show any of these other actions. Click on this little ruler, and that'll bring up our layer scale. What I'm going to show you first is creating a ground plan of a theater, and then we're going to model it. So I'm going to start with a scale of 1/8 inch. But when I do that, I lose my grid, so I need to get my grid back. So I'm going to go to Tools, Smart Cursor Settings, which is Command 8. That brings up the dialog box. You can see they've got lots of different categories here. The one that we're concerned with is grid. The snap grid is 1/8 inch. I'm going to leave that. The reference grid is what I want to change from 1/2 inch. I'm going to change that to 12 inches. So now we have a grid where the grid lines are every 12 inches. And you can see in this palette over here, this is our snapping palette, and these are the different ways that it can snap. This is grid snapping, object snapping, different other types of snapping. If I double click on any one of these, it's going to bring up that same dialog box, the Smart Cursor dialog box. So that also works with all of our tools over here. If I double click on any one tool, it's going to bring up a dialog box for creating, for instance, the rectangle tool. You can see that the rectangle tool's keyboard shortcut is the 4 key, but if I double click on the rectangle, it brings up a create object dialog box. Now I can do the same thing by pressing the number 4 key twice. That'll bring up the same dialog box. Okay, for our theater ground plan, I'm going to just sort of make up some measurements. This is not any specific theater. And I'm going to say that our stage is 70 feet wide and 40 feet deep. The little diagram here shows you can click on different points. That shows you where, when you create the rectangle on the document, where it's going to be placed. So I'm going to select the center one, and that's where my rectangle will be created. If I go to the center of the document, it'll snap to the center of the document, and I click once and that's the stage. If you look up here on the object info, you can see that we have a rectangle. It's 70 feet wide and 40 feet deep. Okay, so next I'm going to turn this rectangle into 4 lines so that it's easier to edit it and modify it. So we're going to go to Modify, Convert, and Convert to Lines. So now you can see up here in our object info that we have 4 lines. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a center line. I'm going to use the line tool, which is this tool here, and you can see that it's the number 2 key. It's the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to snap to the center of that line and draw down and snap to the center of this line. Over here we have the attributes palette. You can see that the pen fill for this line is solid, and I'm going to make it a line type, which essentially is a dash line. The default is a dash line. This little button, if we click on that once, it'll bring up all these preset line styles. I'm going to use this one that says long dash short dash, and that's our center line. Currently in the object info box, the center of that line is selected, so when I change to the dimension, it's going to grow from the center. And I'm going to change from 40 feet to 50 feet. So now we have a center line that goes off of the stage. The other thing that I want to point out on the attributes palette, you can see here that the line weight is 1. That's 1 mil. I'm going to change that. I have preset all these different line weights, and I'm going to change it to a 5. For my printers, I find that a 5 mil line weight is a good lightweight line. Usually for heavyweight lines, I'll use a 15 mil. If you wanted to change your line weights in Vectorworks, you go to Tools, Options, and Line Thickness. And you can see here, these are all the line thicknesses that I put in, and I'm just using units, mils. You can use whatever units you want. Now, all these lines that I've drawn so far, they were drawn as a 1 mil, so I'm going to Command A to select all. That selects all 5 of my lines. I'm going to change all these to a 5 mil. Alright. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of an apron, a curved apron on the front of my stage. So to do that, I'm going to use the line tool, which is the number 2 key. I'm going to start drawing from the center of this line, and I'm going to come over 20 feet. And you can see as I draw that it's going in like 1-inch increments. That makes it very handy, very easy to get to a specific dimension. If you have trouble getting to a specific dimension, as you're drawing, the other thing you can do is hit the tab key, and it'll highlight the length, and then I can just type in 20 feet, hit the enter button, and then click to set the line. So now I see that I have a line that if I click on this end, it is at 0 on the x-axis, and it's 20 feet long. So if I click at the other end, I can now make this a 40-foot long line, and the center of it now is on the 0 axis of the x-axis. So that's the width of my apron. Now I'm going to draw a line straight down from the center, And again, I'm going to hit the tab key, type 36, hit enter, and click to set the line. So now I have a 3-foot long line on center. Now I'm going to draw an arc. And the arc is this tool here, and you can see that its keyboard shortcut is the 3 key. The other thing that we need to know is that for every tool up here we have modifiers. The other thing we should know for the modifiers is that I can click on any one of them to select them. The other thing I can do is the keyboard shortcut is the U key, and the U key will just cycle through each of the modifier keys. The modifier that I want to use is the second one, which is 3-point mode. So I'll bring my cursor down, and when it connects to the endpoint, I'll click and drag, and then when I get to the snap to the other point, I'm going to let go of the cursor there, so that sets my second point. And then when I snap to the end of this line, I'll click once more, and that'll set the third point. And you can see that the fill is solid. I'm going to make the fill none. The next thing I want to do, I'm going to get rid of that line that I created and this line that I created. Now I need to get rid of part of this line where it's in between the arc. So the tool I'm going to use is the trim tool, and its keyboard shortcut is the 7 key. So I hit the 7 key, and when that highlights, I can click once to get rid of that part of the line, click again to get rid of that part of the line. Now I have my stage. For the perimeter of the stage, I want to make all of these lines a heavyweight line. So I'm going to click here and go to 15 mil, and you can see that this line visually is a heavier weight line than this one, which is lighter weight. The little magnifying glass for zooming, if I hover over it, you can see that it's the C key. So I'm going to hit the C key, and I'm going to zoom in, and you can see again that this is a much lighter weight line than this is a heavy weight line. So Command 0 will fit the page. I'm going to show you a couple more preferences that will help us out. Under File, there's Vectorworks preferences, and you can see up here that there's a lot of different tabs. Under the Edit tab, I like to do click and drag drawing. You can deselect that if you want to change it. I don't like the 8 reshape handles, so I leave that deselected. The one that's more important to me is the offset duplication. Most of the time I want to have my duplications offset. Occasionally I don't. So for the most part, I'll leave that one selected. The other one that is important to me is under Display, is the zoom line thickness. If I deselected that, when I zoom in and out, all the lines will just look the same weight. So most of the time I want to be able to see different weight lines. It's helpful. But sometimes when I zoom in, the weight of a line will get in the way of something, so I want to turn that off. So I'll toggle it on and off throughout these tutorials. Okay. The other preferences that we can look at is document setting, which is here under File, Document Preferences. Again, we have several different tabs up here. The one that's most important to me is Dimensions. You can have dimensions associated, which means that then the dimension will always be connected to whatever object you are dimensioning. I don't like to have associated dimensions, so I always turn that off. It's really a preference. If you like to have it on, by all means leave it on. The dimension standards, they have several different presets here. I always like to just create my own. So I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it No Offset. And when I edit it, the first thing that's highlighted is the offset of the number off of the line of the dimension. I always like to have my dimensions right on the line, so I'm just going to make that 0. Click OK, click OK. Then I have to select my no offset dimension, and that's what will be used for this document from here on out. So I'll say OK. Now when I go to dimension, over here in the tool sets, I'm going to select the dimensions notate so that we can see our dimensions. The very first one is a constrained dimension, and you can see that the keyboard shortcut is N. I'm going to be using that a lot. So we'll select the dimension, and I can dimension that this is 70 feet. You can see how the number is right on the line. That's what I prefer. And the depth is 40 feet. Alright. Now we're going to create our proscenium. And since I've already got this apron is 40 feet wide, I'm just going to say that my proscenium is also 40 feet wide. So I'm going to hit the 4 key once, and that'll give me the rectangle tool. So I can click here and drag, and it'll snap to this other end. So we can see that that rectangle is 15 feet long, and I'm going to make it 2 feet deep. Again, if I have trouble getting to that, I can hit tab again, type in 24, and we can see that we have a rectangle that's 15 feet by 24 inches. Now I'm going to move this rectangle up a little bit just to give myself a little bit more of an apron in front of the proscenium. So that would be modify move. The keyboard shortcut is Command M. I'm going to use that a lot. Tab. I'm going to move it up 24 inches. Now the other thing that I have is I have a trackball for a mouse. So it's got a left clicker and a right clicker, and it's got a scroll wheel, and the scroll wheel has a clicker. So I can assign keyboard shortcuts to my right click and to my scroll wheel center click. And the center clicker that I have, I program that to be Command M, which is move, because I move things a lot. So if I click my center click wheel, I get the move dialog box and I can move it. So with this proscenium, I can give this a fill. I can make it black, or instead of black, I can give it a pattern. And under patterns, they have all these different presets. A lot of times I'll use the hatch, or I'll use one of these lighter weight dots. Typically for building structures that are solid and it's not scenery, it's not something that's going to move around, but it's part of the architecture, I'll leave that as black. Okay, so I'm going to make that black, and I'm going to save this document. And I'm going to call this the theater model box. Now this proscenium is very plain, so I think I'm going to add a little bit more detail to it just to make my proscenium a little fancier. So I'm going to turn this rectangle into lines, and again that was modify convert to lines, but I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Option Command L. Actually I think that's Shift Command L, and turn those into 4 lines. Now with the zoom tool, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to take this first line, anchor it at the top. I'm going to make that 18 inches. And then with my line tool, the 2 key, I'm going to draw a line over that is tab 3 inches. I'm going to draw a rectangle. That snapping to that line is 6 inches. I'm going to make it a little bigger and make it 9 inches. Again, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting to it, so I'm going to tab 9, tab 9. That didn't exactly do what I wanted, but I can drag that down. Okay, the reason I drew a rectangle is that it makes it easier then for me to draw an arc. So I'm going to hit the 3 key to make an arc. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to drag this out of the way. I'm going to draw one more line, make that 3 inches. Set my rectangle to that. Okay, that gives me a little bit more architecture. Now I'm going to get the arc tool. I've got the wrong mode. That happens to me all the time. So with the U key, I can change my mode. I'm going to go to the first mode. draw an arc, and I'm going to give that arc no fill so I can see what I'm doing. Then with the line tool, I'm going to draw one more 3-inch line here. Then I'm going to draw one more line. I'm going to make that 9 inches. And then with the arc tool, I'm going to snap into the middle of this line that I just created, drag over, release, and draw another arc. Give that arc no fill. I'm going to delete this first line that I drew. So now we've got a little bit of a fancy proscenium. Again, I'm just making this up. I'm going to drag this line over, connect it to that. So with this line selected and the other end line selected, I'm going to connect these two lines, and that's my right clicker on my mouse. I have programmed to do Command J, which is join. Join. You can see join is Command J. So with my right clicker, I can connect those two lines. Now I'm going to draw a marquee around all these lines to select them all. And I'm going to go to Modify, Compose. That turns all those lines into one polyline. So you can see up here in our object info that we have one polyline. And it automatically went back to the fill of black, which is very handy. Alright, so I have one side of my proscenium. Now if I wanted, I could select this and I could use the mirror tool, which is this tool here in the palette, and it's the B key. I think I changed that myself to the B key because a B is sort of a mirror from top to bottom. That helps me remember that. The way that you can change keyboard shortcuts is under Tools, Workspaces, Workspace Editor. And I'm going to edit the current workspace, which I'm calling Tutorial Recording. So you can see here that under Menus, we can twirl down the triangle and you can see all your different commands and the keyboard shortcuts. If you wanted to make a keyboard shortcut for something, you just select it. You select whichever modifier keys you want, and then you just push a key and it will make that the keyboard shortcut. If that keyboard shortcut is already being used by something else, it will warn you that it's being used by something else. So then under Tools, Basic View Draw, you can see here Mirror. I made that the B key. I don't think that's what it was in Vectorworks originally. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel this. Anyway, so if I hit the B key, that'll give me the mirror tool. I already have this side of the proscenium selected. You can see that it's outlined in orange. I'm going to click, I'm going to snap to my center line. And when I click and draw vertically on that center line, you can see that I'm getting a preview of where that object is going to be mirrored to. I release the mouse button and the proscenium is mirrored to the other side. And that's ground plan. So now let's start making this into a three-dimensional model. You can see up here where it says top plan, that's the view that I'm currently in, is a plan view. If I click on this, these are all the different views that are preset in the program. You can also get to that by going to View, Standard Views, and this is the same list. So then that's two different ways that you can change your views. The keyboard shortcuts for the views is actually your numerical keypad, and it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Each one of those keys is a different view. So if I hit the 3 key, that's the right isometric front. If I hit 6, that's the right view. If I hit 9, that's right rear isometric. So you can see so far that we have just a flat drawing. There is no dimension to it. The 0 key takes me back to top plan. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to draw a marquee around my stage so that everything is selected. Then holding down the shift key, I'm going to deselect the proscenium here and deselect the proscenium there. If I wanted to select those again, I could click and click to select them by holding down the shift key and clicking. The other thing you can do is you can hold down the shift key and draw a marquee around those, and it will deselect both of them at once. Now I have just the perimeter of my stage is highlighted, and it's 5 lines and an arc line. Up here you can see in the object info it says 6 objects. So I'm going to combine those 6 objects into one object. Again, I'm going to use the modify compose, which is the shift command C. That now you can see it makes it into one polyline. It has a fill of white. Now that that is one polyline object, I can now extrude it. So I'm going to go to Model and Extrude, which is Command E. It tells me that the x-axis is 70 feet, the y-axis is 43 feet, and now the extrusion, which is going to be the z-axis, I'm going to make that 48. Now when I hit the 3 key on the numerical keypad, it's going to show me the right front isometric. Now you can see that this has dimension. But when I grew the dimension, it grew vertically in the plus direction on the z-axis. And I actually want to make our stage floor be 0, 0. So I'm going to undo and undo. So I'm back to my polyline. I hit the 3. There is no dimension. Now when I do Command E to do an extrude, instead of doing 48 inches, I'm going to do minus 48 inches. And you can see now that that extrudes it downward on the z-axis. So now that my stage floor is at 0, 0. Alright. Now I could select the proscenium and I could extrude that up. I could say 20 feet. And I could select this one and do the same 20 feet. And I have the beginnings of proscenium. However, since I have this detail on here, how am I going to do a header across that's got the same detail and connects with the leg of the proscenium? Good question. So I'm going to undo and undo. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my 3D modeling tool set, set working plane. And I'm going to set a working plane here at 0, 0. And when I do that, I get these little dots all the way around. If I hover over the blue ones, that will allow me to rotate around the z-axis. It's the color blue. The z-axis is blue. If I hover over the red, it will go around the x-axis, which is also red. If I hover over the green, it'll rotate around the y-axis. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this around the x-axis, and it'll go in increments, and it'll snap to a 90 degree. So now I have a working plane that is 90 degrees. It's vertical, and I'm going to hit the 4 key twice to create a rectangle. And you can see that my dots now are also matching that vertical plane of the working plane. I'm going to select the bottom middle dot as where I'm going to anchor my new rectangle. So my proscenium is 40 feet wide, and I'm going to say it's 20 feet high. Now when I bring the mouse to center, it'll snap there, and when I click, it'll create a rectangle that is in the same orientation as this working plane. Now I actually don't want a full rectangle. I only want 3 sides of it. I want this vertical side, this horizontal across here, and then this other. I don't want the line that goes across the bottom. So I'm going to convert those to lines, which was modify, convert to lines. Now I have 4 lines. You can see up here in the object info. I'm going to click away from the object to deselect it, and then I can select just that bottom line and delete it. Now when I draw a marquee around all 3 of these lines to select all 3 of them, I can now combine those back into a polygon object. So I'm going to compose those. And you see in the object info it turns into a polygon. Now I'm going to snap the arrow is the selection tool. I'm going to snap to this endpoint, and I'm going to click and drag it. And it's going to snap to this proscenium that I drew the plan of. So you can see that this end of the proscenium is snapped there, and this end is snapped here. So now when I select this plan of the proscenium, and then holding down the Shift key, I can also select the outline that I drew for a proscenium. I have both those objects selected, and I can do Model, Extrude Along Path, which is Option Command X. Okay, in this dialog box, one thing that I want to make sure that we select is Fixed Profile. So now this profile is going to be fixed to this path, but the profile is the one that's highlighted in red, and I actually want the path to be highlighted in red. So I'm going to hit the select a path object. I'm going to hit next. Now you can see that the path is in red and it's selected. So now I can hit OK, and it creates my 3D proscenium arch. Now if I didn't do the fixed profile when I extrude along a path, the profile would jump from its center to extrude along the path rather than being fixed at the correct point. I'm just going to undo this and show you what I mean. So I'm going to select my profile and select the path, and I'm going to do the extrude along path, and I'm going to make sure that I have that path highlighted. But this time I won't do the fixed profile, and I'll show you what I mean about the profile will be in the wrong place. Hit OK, and you can see how the profile jumped to its center was along the path. You can see over here on the stage right side where the profile is not in the right place. So I'll just undo that and do the extrude along path one more time, making sure that the profile is fixed and making sure that we have the right path. And I'm going to save that. So now I'm going to look at the front view, which is the number 2 key. And you can see we have a very nice proscenium arch. I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to pretend like instead of our proscenium going flat across, I'm going to put a curve to it. So I'm going to undo, undo, undo. And I'm going to select just this proscenium outline. And I'm going to convert it back into lines. And from the front view, I'm going to draw a line straight up from the middle. Okay, I'm just going to use the dialog and 48 inches. Alright, so now I'm going to use the arc tool, which is the number 3 key, and I need the second mode, which is 3 points. I'm going to click and drag from the first point, let go of the mouse button at the second point, and click to set the third point, and I'm going to give it a fill of nothing. Alright, now I can delete that line that I drew, and I'm going to delete this line that I drew. If I draw a marquee around all 3 of these objects, and if I try to combine them, compose them, it's not going to work. I'm going to hit the 3 key and look at my ISO view to see what the problem is. And you can see that the arc that I drew was back here at the 0, 0 plane, and I needed to be up here with these with the legs of my proscenium. So I'm going to click away from all these objects to deselect them all. I'm going to hover the mouse over the end of this arc and click to select it. Make sure that it says endpoint. So when I click and I drag, I can move that endpoint and it'll snap to this line. Now I can drag a marquee around these 3 objects. Make sure in the object info that it does say 3 objects. And I'm going to modify, compose. So now I have a new outline for my proscenium. I'm going to select this proscenium profile and shift and click to select the path. I'm going to hit model, extrude along path. Again, I have to make sure that I fix the profile. Again, it's highlighted in red, the profile object and not the path. So I have to hit next so that it highlights the path. Hit OK. And now when I hit the number 2 on the numerical keypad to look at the front view, we have a nice arc to our proscenium. The only thing is that we also have an arc to the top of it, and that to me doesn't look good. I'd rather just have this be squared off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle. I'm going to hit the 4 key twice, bring up the dialog box. Our stage was 70 feet wide. I'm going to make this, I'm going to leave this at 20 feet. I'm going to select the lower right hand corner. That'll be where the rectangle will be set. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to snap and click on this point, and we have a new rectangle. 20 feet was kind of tall, so I'm going to just change 20 feet down to 10 feet. That looks better to me. I'm going to go back to my right ISO. I want to extrude it the same dimension as this, so I need to find out what that dimension is. There's a ruler. It's probably under dimension and notes. Tape measure, there it is. And the tape measure is the / key. I'll use that a lot. Okay, so I can snap to this point, click and drag, snap to that point, and it's telling me it's 2 foot 6 inches. So this rectangle is still selected. I can do Command E, and that's 30 inches. I can snap and click at this corner, move it so it snaps and clicks to the proscenium there. Then I hold down the Shift key to select both the proscenium and this rectangle, and I can go up here to Model and Add Solids, and it'll make that one solid object. So now when I look at the front view, it's flat across the top and we still have our proscenium arch.